Welcome, race fans, to Pinewood Derby 101. So there are a lot of videos out there, and I mean a lot of videos, of how to build a Pinewood Derby car. There are very few videos on how to actually run a Pinewood Derby. So let's see if we can give you a basic tutorial today. Now, I have about 6 years of Pinewood Derby experience from both Cub Scouts as well as our Girl Scouts. And so hopefully this will give you some information divided into 3 categories: your overall needs, your impound night needs, and then your race day needs. So overall, you need race rules. If your district or your council already has race rules, especially if they have a district or council level race, use theirs. Make it easier on yourself, especially if the Cubs are going to race in both yours and then the winners are going to move forward to the district. You don't want them to have to modify their cars or build new cars. So let them use those cars. Just use the race rules that are already in place. Life will be much easier. And find a track. So hopefully your pack has a track. If not, some councils have them, some districts. Sometimes other packs will let you borrow them. I know in the case of Girl Scouts, they usually don't have a track, so they borrow them from a local pack that might meet at the same church as they do. You're going to need race software. So if you are borrowing a track, make sure you have the software as well and that you know how to use it. If you need information on software, I can do a separate video about different race software. There's usually only one predominant one that most people use, but we can look at different race software that's out there. You are going to need a laptop to run that race software and connect to the track, because the track talks to the software actively during the race. Problem is, and you're going to want to get this stuff out early to check, some of those racetracks are old enough that they still connect using serial ports. And most laptops nowadays do not have serial ports. You're lucky if you still have that 9-pin port. Most of them do not have serial ports. So go ahead now, figure out if you need an adapter, figure out if that software and that track and the laptop you're using all connect. Some packs still have an old laptop that stays with their track. Just make sure it all works. Don't wait till impound night. Go ahead and set it up a ways ahead of time. Maybe you're going to do a build day with your pack, which is great, because to maximize participation, hosting build days or cut days for the pack are really important. You can do them during den meetings. You can do them at a separate time. You can have den leaders tie them into belt loops and achievements. Or for Girl Scouts, they have some of the automotive badge work in the building. And so you can tie all that in together if you think ahead. But that's also a great time to set the track up and test it one night, just to make sure that you have all the software and the pieces to work. You also don't want to borrow somebody's track and then find out that you don't have the right connectors and pieces to make that work. So make sure you take the time to see what laptop it needs and what the connection points are. And I cannot stress enough, set up the track, learn how to set it up, test it, do all that stuff. When it comes to impound night, I'm going to talk about that in a bit, but you're going to need tables for the cars. You're going to need some bungee cords to hold those cars in place. You're going to need pennants or rope to create a barrier so kids aren't crossing it. Once the cars are impounded, once that track is set up, you don't want anyone back there touching it after impound night and during race day. So you want to make sure you have a barrier between the audience and the cars and the track. You need an official scale as well. This is going to be the one that counts. People are going to bring their cars. They're going to bring graphite powder. They're going to bring weights. And they're actually going to tweak their car based on what your scale says. I've seen people drill out wood while they're there trying to change to make sure they meet weight or that they're meeting the dimensional tools. So you need a car measurement tool as well. Some way to make sure that the car is meeting the dimensions that your district or your pack sets forward. And again, that scale is key because there are people that are going to use some button weights and things just to get it to the 5-ounce marker, if that's what you're using, exactly at 5 ounces based on your scale. You're also going to have people that are taking weights off of their car or, again, drilling out wood so that they can be on weight. And then, of course, race day. You're going to need projectors, screen, so that your computer is just showing that software up there so people can follow along. You're going to need volunteers, you're going to need trophies, and then if you're going to be there a little while, you're going to want to think about food. So do you have volunteers to bring snacks and drinks to make sure that you all stay fed and hydrated. So track layout and placement, super important. Make sure you have it where people can get around both sides, but that you can reach the cars that are impounded and other people can't. So because kids love to touch them and pick them up, but make sure you can reach them from the starting line where you're not having to cross that barrier back and forth. And make sure your track is level. It's got to be on a level surface, that you understand how to put it together. I could do a separate video about how to put a track together. Tracks are different, but I can show you ours. You see here, this one was in the middle of the floor. The cars were impounded elsewhere, so the tables were on the other side of this. Really hard to get back and forth. You need to give your volunteers room to get from the starting line to the finish line back to the starting line when they're bringing cars back without really blocking the audience. And so it's really great when you can set it up with one side to a wall if you have that luxury, but down the middle of the room, probably not the best idea, just because it bifurcates the room and you don't have access to your impounded cars. So put some thought into where you're going to put those. You see a towel here at the end, really important, because those backstops that you see that are stopping the cars don't always work, especially if a car is going super fast or maybe comes off the track a little. So having that towel back there is super helpful. You want to make sure you understand how to put the track together. You want to make sure that starting gate is working. You want to make sure that finish line and all the electronics in there are working too. I mentioned having the rope. So if you have some type of rope or you have these race flags, you can create a barrier between the audience as well. This particular track was up on stilts. This one you see here is on the ground. So lots of different ways your track can be aligned. So impound night is really important. So on impound night, you want to have about an hour and a half to 2 hour time frame. You have all your racers sign in. You'll need their name, their car name, their den, or if you are a Girl Scout troop, their level. And then you're going to assign a number to every car. And you're going to put that number sticker on the bottom of the car. You're also going to weigh and measure all of the cars. And then put that label, again, that label underside with the number of the sticker. It's really important to weigh and measure because your Pinewood Derby rules are going to have maximum measurements and weight for each car. And to be fair, you need to make sure that they meet those rules. So you can either get a jig that's already been prepared that has the right size for your race dimensions. And then you want to get a kitchen scale, and that is your official scale for the race. Now, what's great about impound night is you can have a toolbox there, or you can encourage people to bring tools, and they can make last minute adjustments to the car. But once they give you the car officially, they cannot touch it again until after the race is the next day. So that is what impounding means. So some people show up with some extra weights. They have you measure it on the official scale, and then they may add a weight or two just to get it right up to the 5 ounce mark if 5 ounces is your limit during impound night and getting ready for race day. You'll also notice on my list I had bungee cords and tablecloths. So this is really to hold the cars. So when you're impounding them, and this helps them to not slide off the table. You never know what's going to happen, and you don't want to damage a car that somebody put a lot of work into. So you see this one has dowel rods on it. Some people put bungee cords under the tablecloth so you can't see them, but the cars are actually caught up on there so they don't roll off. But this is how you're going to display the cars. And it's really important that you make sure that this impound table is behind a rope so kids aren't picking them up. Younger kids are going to want to come up and touch them, and they're going to be excited to see other cars that look really cool. And you don't want that to happen, especially if someone has put graphite on the wheels and done some last minute tweaks right before they impounded it. You don't want someone picking up those cars and moving them. And you don't want to pick up the cars and move them around a lot after they've been impounded. So you really just want to weigh the car and then put it on the table where it's going to go. And again, number stickers. So one thing you can do is you can have corresponding numbers on the table so you're not having to flip over the car every time to see the number. But you definitely need the number on the car. And then an added advantage is if you wanted to put a corresponding number on the table as well. Or maybe you have a chalkboard strip or something else. You can see here there's little tags telling you what number each car is. I mentioned having the track up against a wall or near a space, so it's not going to be right up against the wall, but you definitely want it somewhere where you can rope it off. And you want that roped off area to keep kids from not only touching the track, but also the cords and the cars. So you need to leave yourself some space where you can maneuver in that roped off area and access the cars very easily, as well as the start and the finish line. You don't want any obstacles between all of those. And just make it easier on yourself. So put the cars where kids can see them but can't touch them, but where they're close to the starting block, because that's just going to make it easier on you when we talk about race day and what happens there. You also want to use the impound time to set up your track and make sure you have volunteers there and test that track one last time just to make sure everything runs and that the software runs. You can actually be putting kids into the software while you are impounding cars if you have enough volunteer help to do that. And again, we're displaying cars on the table behind the rope line. Use those long bungee cords to create 2 and 3 rows of backstop to hold the cars on the table. Cover them with a tablecloth if you want to hide the bungee cords. And then that second set of corresponding stickers is really helpful where each car goes. And then no one touches those cars once they've been impounded. Another fun thing you can do on impound night is set up a photo booth area so kids can take pictures with their cars as they bring them in, or go ahead and have that set up so it's ready for the next morning and kids can take pictures after the race, because again, they can't touch their cars once they've been impounded. And now it is race day, and so we are going to start our engines. So you definitely need volunteers for race day. You cannot pull this off on your own. You need some additional assistance. So 1 to 2 volunteers at a check-in table, an announcer if that's not you, someone to operate the computer and make sure that it's lining up with everything, a start line volunteer, so someone that puts the cars in the right slots when the computer says that Sally's car needs to go in slot 1 and Jack's car needs to go in slot 2 to make sure that's happening. A volunteer to man the car table and hand the cars to the start line. It doesn't sound like you may need it, but when you get going and these races happen really fast, it's important to have somebody that's putting cars back and handing them off. 1 to 2 volunteers to ferry those cars back and forth. So when they get to the finish line, somebody's got to bring them back, and I'll show you some different methods for doing that. And then if you're doing voting, which we'll talk about for best car or best design car, you're going to need someone at your voting table to help you with that. One really important thing, test your track again. Get there early, make sure that it's working, and make sure that before the doors open, that the starting gate's working, the finish line's connecting with the computer. Ensure you know which slot is number 1 on the racetrack, so go ahead and test that, and that it matches the computer records. Sometimes those get flip-flopped, and you don't want to be running the car in the wrong slot so that the computer's recognizing it wrong. It's really easy to get those flipped. So put a number on the end of the track to the number of the starting line slots if it's not already marked, or a sticker, or just something so you know where number 1 is. And if you're the announcer for the event, one great thing, have some car jokes in your pocket. Have a few others ready just in case of delays. Have some to start off. There's always delays during the race. There's going to be false starts. There's going to be the wrong cars being raced. There's going to be switch numbers. So go ahead and have some ready, and don't be afraid to ask from the audience. Kids have some great jokes, and it's really fun to listen to them. So ask for jokes from the audience if you get to a point where your volunteers are working on the computer system and you need a few minutes. So I mentioned the trays. So you're going to need a way to get the cars from the finish line back to the start line. You're not going to want to hold them by hand, because you don't want a car to get dropped and all the kids' hard work to have them watch it break because a volunteer dropped it. So you can either take box lids and carry them that way. There's folks out there that have 3D printed car carriers specifically, or you can look at shoe boxes, just anything that you can fit them in. So you can see here, this is a 3D printed one, and the numbers on it match the numbers on the starting gate in that correct order, which really helps your volunteers because they know exactly what car and where to put it. So this is an example of one of the software programs and how it displays. So you are going to start your races by den, which is why we asked for what category the child is in when they registered. And because you're going to load that into the software, and the software is going to group them together. So the software will tell you which cars go in which slot. And you're going to tell it whether you want to race your whole group at once or you want to race by those levels. And that's going to be based on what award categories you set up. So you're going to tell it which cars go in. It's going to tell you which cars go in which slot. And then each car will race one per each line or track to ensure that there's no unfair advantage, as I mentioned earlier, or a defect in one of the slots. So if you're using a 3-slot track and you have 9 cars in a den or 9 cubs in a den, then you will have 9 races for that den. Each race is about a minute from load to getting the cars back to the table, so it goes really quickly. Once your den or division finishes, you're going to finalize it in the software. And then you can choose whether to show the race results right then or to go to the next den. I recommend going to the next den and doing all your awards at the very end. It helps with the anticipation, and the kids can sometimes tell, but because their car's racing multiple times against other different cars, a lot of times they don't know who really was the ultimate winner. You can also program your software to do a pack champion. So it will automatically take the top from each den and give you a grid to race again, or will auto-calculate a winner based on previous results. So that's a choice you make if you want to have that overall grand champion and whether you want them to race again for that. It can use current times or you can do new times. If you're doing a pack champion category and re-racing the cars, you'll need to award or announce your den champions so they know that they're moving forward. Otherwise, it's kind of awkward to have a mini ceremony. It can be awkward to have a mini ceremony before the larger one. So you really need to think about how you want to determine your pack champion. It can also be awkward if you're only racing some of the cars again and some of the other kids are like, hey, why aren't you racing mine? Some districts and councils have races that the pack winners can enter. So find out if yours has one and have that information ready so your pack winners, so they know when the district race is. So it's not just the overall. A lot of them will take the top 2 or 3 in the pack. And then you can decide if you want your kids to vote on different categories of cars based on theme. And so one really cool idea that someone in our pack came up with is they handed out chips. Every person came in and got 2 chips. Here they are. And then they had cups with the corresponding numbers on them right by the impound or at a separate table near it. And so they matched the numbers and they could cast. They got 2 chips so they could vote for up to 2 and put their token in. So now we have awards, and you can really do the awards how you want to. And you can use those tokens and have them vote for best design or fan's choice, fastest looking car, wildest car, best use of stickers, most colorful, best paint jobs, spirit of VSA, funniest, or you can have awards by den or grade level. And then for race categories, if you're doing trophies or however you want to do this, you can have it by den levels. You can have an outlaw race, which means anything goes. They don't have to meet the weight and the dimension restrictions. You can have a parents race. You can have a race for siblings. And then, of course, the best overall. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. You can do trophies for your prizes. You can do medals for your prizes. But really, you need to determine your race categories at the very beginning so people know what cars to build and your design categories so they can really put some effort into trying to achieve those. But not everyone can win. Some people just want to have fun designing the cars. And so giving them a category that allows them to do that really allows your Cubs to show their creativity. Will there be an overall winner? Let them know that. Will the den winners race for the pack trophy? Let them know all that up front. And then you can either build or purchase your trophies. So I've seen lots of different ways folks have done trophies. Again, if you need ideas for trophies, let me know, and I will do a separate video just on that. Trophies will really depend on your budget. So some people opt to do more medals and fewer trophies. Some people to choose to build their own for the design categories. You can see here, this was a district race. And so there was a grand champion overall. And then they had first, second, and third in each level as well. So from kindergarten up through 5th grade. So that's a lot of trophies. And so it just depends on what your budget is. And that is the basics of how to run a Pinewood Derby. So you want to recruit volunteers for Impound Day and race day. They can be different volunteers. Just make sure you have some help for each of those. Again, Impound night is probably going to be an hour to an hour and a half. Folks drop off cars maybe between 6:30 and 8 on a Friday night, and your race day is Saturday morning. And you can build or purchase your trophies. Really, district rules. So if your district already has rules, if they have a district race, use their rules. Don't make it harder on yourself. It's a lot easier for your pack. And so that way the kids can use that same car that won at your derby and move it forward to the district, and they don't have to rebuild it. Food and snacks. We didn't really talk about that, but have a plan. If you're going to be there for a few hours, it's always great to have some volunteers do food or snacks for you. Make sure you have a projector and a screen, and that they work, and that they talk to the laptop, and that they talk to the race software, and it makes your life a lot easier if you can just project that screen for the crowd. It's fun to see where the cars are coming in. It has the times of how fast the cars went, and so that can really help the kids to keep up with the races. And it also shows the volunteers what cars are on deck, so they can know what cars to get ready to have, so your race can move smoother. And make sure you have those trays to ferry cars on race day back and forth. And make sure you have a towel. So I don't have that on there, but some of the tracks don't have stoppers at the end. Grab a beach towel, bring it with you, put it at the end, so that way the cars don't run off the end of the track. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe yours has a great stopper. It's always great to have something down there, because you're going to have a really fast car and you don't want it to break when it comes off the bottom of the track. Once Impound Day is over, or Impound night, make sure you get all the cars loaded in the software, so you're not doing that next morning. Maybe you're loading it as they come in. One of our volunteers had a Google form this last time, so when kids brought their cars in, they could fill out that Google form before they got there, or they could fill it out when they got there on a laptop, and it had all their cars' information. So you want them to be able to pick a number. You need the car name, the den they're in or category, and then their name. So get all of that information that night. And then when you come in the next day, test your track. You've tested it on Impound night, go ahead and test it that morning again. Make sure the car you race in slot 1 matches what comes up on slot 1 on the computer, so you don't have any errors. It's always great to have a few sample cars with you from prior years. Most Pinewood Derby rules require the car be made in that particular year. So any cars you have from prior years, bring those with you and use those as your test cars, so that you're not using people's actual cars to test that morning. Go ahead and run 2 or 3. You can always reset the software, but as dummy cars in the system, just to make sure your track is working. And don't forget to have fun. So this is supposed to be a fun event. I know when you're planning an event, sometimes it's hard to sit back and look at all the excitement. And only you know if you miss something. So don't worry about it. Everyone else is going to have a great time. They're never going to know if something goes wrong. And so just enjoy the day. Make sure you take pictures. That's probably another volunteer role you could add if you have enough volunteers. Sometimes it's really easy to ask a parent who's not heavily involved to just say, hey, will you grab some pictures of the event? And that gives them a volunteer task for the day without really having to plan too far ahead and really commit to anything. So have a great time and good luck with your race.